Now it's Cotton, one-on-one with Tui. Little crossover, slides his way through. Out it goes, Doolittle from the top of the key. Brings the game alive. Jack White, a no-go. Here's Pinder. Pinder, bounce pass it round. Doolittle with a two again. Ty Webster. Looks into the pass. Cotton to find Miller. This time makes a man in the corner. Knock it down. Stoke it from outside. Same spot, different result.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We are back. Season 2 of the Wildcat Wrap. For your basketball needs, you, of course, can hit us up at the Basketball Fix for everything that's been happening on the off-season and what an off-season that it has been. And to break it all down, that's happened not only across the last 48 to 72 hours, but across the last 2 or 3 weeks as well. A couple of big signings for the Cats. But then the big news, the big elephant in the room. With me, as he has been numerous times, and of course he's the big chief, the head honcho, the main man of the Basketball Fix, but also does commentary down at the Rockingham Flames for the NBL 1 competition. Josh Higgins, welcome back to what will be just an enthralling, very exciting, and possibly a little bit of a sad podcast. You could possibly say that, at least at the beginning. But Josh, welcome to the show, and how have you been, mate?
Batty, mate. Yeah, I've been good. It's been a busy off-season so far. It actually feels funny back into podcasting. I've been trying to figure out what's the best step in the right direction for the Basketball Fix with platforms and trying to get everything streamlined and making all of these amazing podcasts that will be coming back on our channels very soon even easier for all you guys to be able to use and make it even better product for all the listeners at home as well. So it's been a busy off-season, but it's also been a sad off-season as well. We've seen some of our favourite Wildcat members moved by the teams. We've also seen some new faces and some returning faces to the Wildcats as well. So season 2 of the Wildcat Wrap, mate, I think it's a good way to start off the episode, probably talking about the biggest news, not in Perth Wildcat history, maybe even the NBL's history as well.
Yeah, like you alluded to it just then, and of course earlier on too. It's the name, the individual that's been on everyone's lips across the whole board. But just in case you have been living under a rock, Bryce Cotton has joined the Adelaide 36ers officially, a 3-year deal. There is so many layers to this, so many machinations. Like there's so much to unpack here as well. Josh, I'm going to throw it to you first. And, everyone, especially in the Basketball Fix team, we had so many opinions. It was really, really divided. There were people that were upset, sad, just happy for Bryce to be back in the league. So I'll throw it to you first because you obviously got a bit more to do with the backstory of it as well. And I've sort of have some theories that I've heard too. But Josh, I'll throw it over to you first just to give us your thoughts.
Yeah, well, it 100% divided the Basketball Fix team, and it also 100% divided the NBL community as well. We saw this deal essentially get done overnight is what it sort of came out to be as well. A 3-day engagement with Bryce Cotton and the Adelaide 36ers, in which eventually saw Bryce Cotton sign with the 36ers. Now, it all comes after the numerous amount of reports where Bryce did come out and state that he wasn't going to be joining any other team in the NBL, and he'll probably look to take his talents overseas as well. So most people thought the safe option is probably heading to Japan to play under Trevor Gleeson at the Chiba Jets, and that unfortunately fell through. Now, I think there's a piece to this story where Bryce was in Puerto Rico and maybe just felt like the international basketball world is not for me right now. I've got my family set up. I've got everything ready to go in Australia, and everyone is loving that sort of culture over there. And the NBL is a great league. So maybe that's where the Adelaide 36ers may have seen a slight little piece of the puzzle where they may have been able to come in. And Josh King obviously went over there as well to go coach Bryce Cotton in the Puerto Rico Basketball League as well. So maybe there was a slight little chance that the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix were able to secure his signature as well. But this was shocking for a number of reasons, obviously. And, there's been all the reports, and I think there's been a bit of unfair media scrutiny about Bryce as well. Obviously, the West Australian is quite a disappointing one, the lying king. And I know, obviously, it's a bit of tongue-in-cheek and everything like that. But to be going out there and talking about arguably the greatest player of all time in the NBL, and obviously the best Perth Wildcat player of all time in that sort of sense as well, I'm quite disappointed. So, we haven't heard much from both really Bryce just yet. He's obviously got a podcast coming out, which I'm eager to listen to, but we haven't heard anything from the Perth Wildcats as of yet as well, which is super surprising. So there's so much to play out in this situation, mate. But what were your immediate reactions? Because mine was immediately sadness, but then just happiness because we've got him back in the league. And, I hope we don't see people booing Bryce Cotton at RSC Arena. I know what's going to happen, and I'm going to be disappointed in people that do boo him because he's a 3-time champion with the Perth Wildcats and a 5-time NBL MVP. So why would we boo someone like that? You've got to sort of think about it. Everything you hear about Bryce, he is the nicest guy. He's the biggest go with the flow guy. And anything in basically like a podcast coming out would have just not happened unless he's been wrongly done. So what were your immediate thoughts, Batty? Because I know it shocked you as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just you never thought you'd see it coming. I think when he just didn't sign those contracts across the season, when like that announcement just never came, you're kind of just resigning yourself to the fact that he's probably not going to sign with Perth, but he's more likely going to go overseas because the money that we were hearing that he was going to be able to be offered, like between 1.4 and 1.5 million at that stage, people just thought that he wouldn't be able to be offered that kind of money here in the NBL. So you just wouldn't be able to match it. And we're talking about, $300,000 to $500,000 a season. Add that over 2 or even 3 years. That's a lot that can make a difference in someone's life. And this is a guy with a young family. It's interesting you bring up the point about, playing that international basketball, which he hasn't normally done in his off seasons, going to Puerto Rico, obviously doing really well, but maybe the scene just wasn't right for him. And he's still got a young daughter. And maybe just he didn't think that it would be, whether it was in Japan, of course, which was the likely destination that he was going to end up. He just think, NBL is a really great competition. The lifestyle, whether it's Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, wherever you go, you're going to be fine and looked after. And you have to give credit and kudos to Adelaide. They saw that he was still not signed for Japan or anywhere else. And they're like, why don't we just ask the question? I think the big aspect is the Perth Wildcats and the organisation here. If Adelaide did it and they did it in the space of 3 days, and like only started last week, why didn't Perth go and ask that question? It just reeks to me of the relationship had already broken down. And you sort of alluded to it a little bit earlier. I've listened to Lockie Reed on a couple of different podcasts, and the things that he has said are that there were deadlines that the Perth Wildcats had to get contracts to him and his management. And by the time they got them, they were past the deadlines. That's a sign of disrespect. If I'm Bryce Cotton, this is the greatest player that your club has probably ever had, one of, or if not the greatest import the competition has ever seen. And the other part of it is when they re-signed Coach John Rillie for the extra 3 years, there was absolutely no consultancy with Bryce at all. And I know that the management has to make that decision, but we're talking about the guy that's going to be the pillar for your club and has been the pillar for your club for the last 6-7 years. Just say, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think you can work with it? So, yeah, it's a lot of mismanagement. And also the last thing that I'll wrap it up is, and you sort of said it too, it's a case of, why have we not heard from the Perth Wildcats? Even when Bryce said that he was officially taking up free agency, nothing from Perth aside from, I think it was an Instagram post. And then when you hear about the Adelaide news, barely anything. Like, I want to hear from Danny Mills if I'm a fan. I want to hear from John Rillie if I'm a fan. I want to hear from just someone in their front office team to say, what is going on? What has happened? Give us some good news. Tell us that you're looking for someone, or something along the lines of that. But divided is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I think you're bang on, mate. And the hardest part as well is I think it's Adelaide as well. So, you sort of look at what they have been over the last couple of years, and you probably think the Perth Wildcats are, if not one of the most stable franchises in NBL history, they're definitely up there. And the Adelaide 36ers, I've been calling them the biggest basket case in professional basketball around the world. He's basically uprooted his life to go from Perth to then go to Adelaide, to essentially go to a team where, there could be the same sort of problems that he may be facing in Perth. But the thing for him is, it's just so important for him to get out of Perth and to get into a new environment. That's the most alarming thing for me, for Perth Wildcats fans, and possibly even Perth Wildcats potential signees, which we'll touch on a little bit later in the show. So, there's a lot of things obviously going on, and we'll jump into this next little segment here as well. And you sort of alluded to it a little bit there with a couple of your comments. And the whole point around, did the Perth Wildcats just not want Bryce Cotton back? And is that as simple as it was? And you speak about, the misjudgments. We've obviously not, reports are that he didn't speak with the management or anyone in the front office about John Riley's 3-year extension. And I don't think there's been any quietness around the fact that it does seem like Bryce Cotton and John Riley are two different people, and they are a professional relationship. Whereas you'd probably say with Trevor Gleeson, it was more of a personal and professional relationship. You'd probably say Scott Morrison was a dead set, just personal, professional relationship. So, it kind of seems like over the last couple of seasons, it's been brewing for Bryce Cotton to leave. And it's disappointing because there has been obviously a shift in ownership. And this doesn't just come down to Mark Arena, but there are some genuine learnings to come out of this, because even with Danny Mills, he came in and he's a great GM, but he came in and inherited what was a very successful program. He had inherited Bryce Cotton. He inherited Damian Martin, Jesse Wagstaff, Greg Heyer, this core of Australian players, which had been brewing and building over the last couple of seasons. And it's relatively easy when you've got that sort of a core to just go and find a couple of other players around the world to complement that. Now, when all those guys retire and they've all started to fizzle out, well, now the challenges have started. And this is where it really starts to look hard for Danny Mills, because they're having to reset. Now, obviously, they've gone out this offseason and signed Christian Doolittle. They've gone out and re-signed Dylan Windler, and that would have taken up a massive chunk of the money. Dylan Windler is an ex-NBA player and was really starting to find his feet last NBL season, especially towards the back end of the season and in the playoffs. And Christian Doolittle, they went and signed on a 3-year contract, which is super, super important for all Perth Wildcats fans going forward, to have somebody to build your team around. But I think now with this potential Bryce Cotton contract, and obviously the podcast coming out, and we saw a snippet last night, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a quiet podcast at all. I think it is going to be a tell-all podcast, which it is being built up to be. I don't know. I just think there's going to be some implications going forward, which there might be some pushback from the Red Army. There might be some pushbacks from potential signees. There could be a lot going on behind the scenes. And for the Perth Wildcats, I just find it interesting how they haven't gotten ahead of the negative press around them. You'd think you'd want some positive press around you right now in these particular times, and not even just going to Lockie Reed, who has been arguably the biggest Perth Wildcat supporter in NBL media. He's one guy over in Perth with Channel 10. He's constantly covering the NBL. It doesn't really happen in too many other states around Australia. So you've got a good guy and a good media personality wanting to have a comment from you guys, and you just go quiet. I'm not sure it's the right look so far. So I'm interested to see how it all plays out, mate. But have you got any more thoughts on maybe why the Perth Wildcats didn't want to bring back Bryce Cotton?
It certainly is quite a question, because what we're talking about, and we know the accolades of Bryce and what he can do on the court. So it would be just fascinating if you really thought that Perth has sort of reached the ending of that, I guess, relationship. But as you sort of spoken and touched on quite a bit, there clearly was just a breakdown in coaches across the period of time. Whether it's Morrison and then into really, Bryce maybe just didn't seem to be as happy or, loving and enjoying the environment. There, of course, still won heaps of matches, got to semi-final series. So you wouldn't say they were unsuccessful seasons, but, if it wasn't for Bryce doing Bryce kind of things, would they have reached those kind of peaks that they did during those seasons? Possibly not. And, again, it's about that we're not hearing from all of these, I guess, back office staff individuals. And when they don't come out, when they don't give us comments, when they don't give us positivity, love messaging, saying we're looking for the best kind of players that we can, and, watch this space, there's news to come. When that doesn't happen, then we have podcasts like ours. Then we have people on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, making all those kinds of comments and speculation. And then the story gets taken away from them. So, yeah, I know maybe it was best for Bryce and his life and his family to leave Perth, to have a clean break. Chose Adelaide willingly for some God knows reason, but that's okay. Good luck to him, of course. But maybe for Bryce, it was the best thing. But no doubt, Perth have fumbled it. They were asleep at the wheel. They've dropped the ball. And we have to move on to bigger. Well, I wouldn't say bigger and better, but hopefully some nicer things.
Yeah, well, I think the thing that interests me though is, and I don't want to harpoon on Mark Arena right now, because I think he has done a good job in certain situations, but he's very quick to go on social media and I guess go at people that sort of go at him. But in these situations, he seems to be quite reserved in not really giving anyone anything. And I know they don't owe anyone anything right now, but like I feel like right now all the fans need is a little bit of stability, and that's what this podcast is about. It's not necessarily about us having a crack at the management, but it's maybe just trying to hold them slightly accountable for some of the things that they may have been lacking over the last couple of years. And I think if we were to look at this in the scale of what this really is and compare it to the NBA, this is like LeBron James at the Cleveland Cavaliers, for example, in the 2016 to 2020 era, where he's at the height of his powers. He's the greatest player in the world. He is a perennial MVP candidate. He's constantly trying to win championships. And essentially what you go and do is you don't involve him in any of the moves or any of the conversations. And that happens in the NBA all the time. We know what happens. The stars are what the league is built around. It's not the front office. It's not ownership. The players on the court are what draws the people to buy the tickets to get in the stands to watch the games. No one's going there to go and see Mark Arena. No one is going there to see Danny Mills. And maybe that's a slight little thing that the Perth Wildcats have got to adjust right now is it's not about you right now. It's about the team and it's about the fans and having a great product on the court. So I don't know. I just don't think there'd be any other superstar who would be not involved in a coach discussion where clearly there is some sort of a breakdown in that. And I understand it, obviously. I just think Mark Arena got the job and there was a little bit of bad press around the Perth Wildcats with Craig Hutchie's tenure there as well. And he just wanted to get something done. All right, John, you got a 3-year deal. That's some good press for the company. And it didn't really... it wasn't seen that way, was it? All the fans really were like, whoa, what's happening here? 3-year deal for John, really? What has he proved? Yeah. Give him another year. Make him prove himself again. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting. And I think it's a massive learning curve for the Perth Wildcats. Saying that right now just feels so weird because this club, like, once again, has been a perennial playoff team, a perennial championship contender for its entire existence. So I'm disappointed in the whole situation, but I know there's a couple of players who we're going to speak about right now who may be joining the Perth Wildcats, and there's some big names, aren't they, Batty?
Oh, massive. And, even before the Bryce situation came about, these were two individuals in particular that I think like what Perth has been missing across the last couple of seasons has been like a local big, a local five, like someone to support Christian Doolittle. We know that Christian can play, close to a 2 to 5 at a stretch of 1 as well, but he needs just that extra big, and like gone to the days where we've had the Manny Knights kinds of players, the Angus Brown, those kinds of individuals, even John Mooney to an extent as well, that kind of just rebound, just gobbler. He gets everything that just cleans the glass so hard. Dylan Windler is certainly, he has the capacity and ability to do that kind of thing, but just a really tall guy in general. So, JLA, Joe Lualachil, and Yanni Wetzel, they're the two names that everyone has been looking at. You've got your own theories on this, Josh, which I'm just really curious to sort of hear about when we're sort of chatting off air. So yeah, over to you, mate.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting period for the Perth Wildcats here. And we'll throw some highlights up of these two guys as well for the fans at home who may have not seen much of these two guys, but both of these guys are genuine ballers. Both have played in the NBL. Yanni's obviously playing overseas in Europe right now. But it seems to be at the moment, all reports are linking that Yanni Wetzel is more of a priority essentially, but it doesn't look like the deal will be done. And it looks like JLA is more of a chance. So take that how it does. And obviously, they've gone out and signed a couple of JLA's sort of closest friends in Sunday Detch and Lat Mayen as well. That's obviously a massive step in the right direction for the Perth Wildcats. But both of these guys have similar play styles, but are slightly different as well. So both can get in transition and push the pace as big men. They've got good defensive capabilities. Joe Lualachil is probably a slightly better outside shooter, but Yanni Wetzel has 100% gotten that better as the seasons have gone on, especially over in Europe as well. But it's going to be an interesting one for the Perth Wildcats because they have to nail one of these guys. It is crucial because there is no one else in the market right now in terms of local bigs or even local point guards as well who they can go out. And if they don't nail one of these signings, I'm sorry, Perth Wildcats fans, but you may as well write off NBL 26. And that's as simple as it is. And I personally think that, and I've said it before, I've said it on this podcast before, when Bryce Cotton's interview drops, it's going to get a lot of people thinking, is a Joe Lualachil going to want to come back to the NBL, to the Perth Wildcats for probably a bit of a pay cut compared to where he is right now and what he's on right now for an organization which seems to be from all reports, a little bit lost in their ways right now. Yanni Wetzel definitely isn't going to be. He is absolutely enjoying his time. He's playing over there with a former teammate in William McDowell White as well over there, and they're having great success as well. So I just think the way that we've got to look at this whole situation is the priority for not only the Perth Wildcats organization, but the fan base is to have one of these guys re-signed, signed immediately, and then they go to Summer League and potentially pick up an import point guard as well to be able to distribute the ball. That's the most important thing right now. So let's just say hypothetically, import point guard, Sunday Detch as that shooting guard. You've got Dylan Windler as the small forward. You've got Christian Doolittle as the power forward, and you've got one of Yanni Wetzel or JLA as the center. That's a really solid starting lineup. And then you've got Elijah Pepper potentially coming off the bench. You've got Lap Mayan coming off the bench. You've got Jesse Wagstaff coming off the bench. And there's obviously a few more signings to be made later on in the offseason as well. So it's an important time for the Wildcats because they're at the mercy right now, I think, of the media, and obviously maybe potentially this Bryce Cotton situation. This couldn't have happened at a worse time for the Perth Wildcats. So I know, once again, this isn't about trying to harpoon on the Perth Wildcats and getting stuck into them, but it's all relevant to essentially what this situation looks like and possibly could affect future signings and obviously potential signings this year as well.
Yeah, because it all comes down to being an attractive organization and having all your ducks lined up. And when the best player that you've had for the last 6, 7, 8 seasons, when he leaves, and then, whatever is said in that podcast over the coming week, but the fact that just how he left and all the circumstances surrounding that, when you're trying to appeal to someone of the caliber of, JLA or Yanni Wetzel, and they've been in the league before, they've seen what Bryce has done, and they've also known, the caliber of the Perth Wildcats organization. If it's not as it's perceived, like two people on the outside, if it's starting to at least appear as falling apart, like that's not good when you're trying to sign players. It's not the kind of stable environment like anyone's going to be wanting to sign a 2-year contract and the like. So whether it's Yanni, whether it's JLA, whether it's that import, passing guard and a little bit of shooting too that they're clearly looking for, and it's a piece that they're going to be going to Summer League for. There are so many questions, and it's all a case of what is Bryce going to tell us. And of course, we will have another podcast after that, once that comes out, to sort of answer the questions that we posed in this podcast and see what kind of information Bryce is going to give us. So yeah, fascinating, but also just not really good from a stability perspective, from a signing perspective for the Perth Wildcats for sure.
Yeah, and I think we've still got to give them their credit as well. Like, they've gone out and re-signed Doolittle, Windler. They've brought over Sunday Detch. They've brought over Lap May, and they've re-signed Elijah Pepper. They've brought back Jesse Wagstaff for another year. They've done an incredible job when you look at it. And I guess they were doing an incredible job until Bryce Cotton mysteriously just pops up back in the NBL at Adelaide. And I don't think there'd be as much pushback if he landed in a Melbourne or if he landed in a Sydney, just because they're organisations with historically a lot of money and obviously historically a lot of success as well in big markets. It's the fact that it's Adelaide, the biggest basket case of the NBL, a club who has had to overspend so many times just to get people there purely because of their culture problems. Now, you bring Bryce Cotton in, those culture problems essentially go away overnight, and that is where you start to refresh and rebuild that organization. And you see how excited Mike Kelly is. There's a connection there. They coached and played together at the Utah Jazz all those years ago as well. So there's a connection between Bryce Cotton and Mike Kelly and obviously Mike Welser. And he obviously knows, Bryce on a personal level, has a massive respect for him as well. And the Adelaide 36ers right now are in win now mode. They want success. They know how important it is right now for their club to have success after all of the problems that have been going on over the last couple of years. So I just think it's such an interesting situation because, people were asking questions and there was whispers and everything like that. What's happening with Bryce and everything and it all led to overseas. But to the Adelaide 36ers credit, well done. 3 days to get this deal done. Arguably the biggest deal in NBL history, arguably the greatest player of all time in the NBL history as well. And that's the most exciting thing right now. That's what Perth Wildcats fans, let's not get lost in the moment right now. Let's just enjoy ourselves right now. Enjoy the fact that our player, our guy, has still got a chance to become the greatest player of all time. And I know he's obviously on another team. He's on a rival's team, but I just think it's going to be interesting. But a quick one for you, Batty, before we wrap this episode up. A funny one was raised to me. Had a question in one of the comment sections on one of our posts. Now, we've heard about expansions in the NBL. We've heard about, obviously, the Gold Coast Blades potentially coming back, the Canberra Cannons. Someone said to me, is this the perfect time to try to get a second license together for WA because of how divided the fan base is right now? And I think it's a great decision. What about yourself, mate?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. Like, we know that that there's two teams in the AFL, so like there's certainly probably enough, I guess, scope, and basketball's such a popular sport in here too, from grassroots right up to NBL 1 level. Pretty much every single game there's between 11 and 14,000 there, so you could definitely say that there's scope there. And with I guess the feeling of fans at the moment, maybe a new franchise could sort of, I guess, create a little bit more success from a purely popularity perspective of basketball in general. And you're going to have that Fremantle, the big brother little brother kind of argy bargy approach. It's certainly something to look into, and from a viability perspective, I think that there will be enough people wanting and willing to support a brand new team. We just had an announcement a couple of weeks ago of the Perth Bears, an NRL team coming into WA for the 2027 season. So that maybe now is the time to strike as well, because there's going to be people wanting to try new sports, wanting to get onto new franchises, as they did all those years ago when Fremantle first came into the competition. Because when the West Coast came in, it was basically just a state team, so it was the only team to support, and then suddenly you had a choice. So everyone has just known Perth Wildcats, Barstool, that's it. You just go for Perth. But suddenly, in a couple of seasons, you may have a choice. So yeah, a really great question, and yeah, something to consider from an NBL perspective.
Yeah, definitely something to consider there, mate. And obviously, I just want to end this episode off with saying there's plenty, obviously, to go, and obviously plenty to come ahead as well for the Perth Wildcats. There's a lot of interesting things going to be coming out over the next couple of weeks, and I think it's a really important period of time here for the Perth Wildcats to figure out what the hell they want to do going forward. What sort of organization do they want to be? Do they want to be an organization which potentially turns into an Adelaide 36ers? Or do they want to turn into and continue to be one of the top 3 clubs in NBL history, alongside of the Melbourne United and Sydney Kings as well? So it's an important time here for the Perth Wildcats. And I just plead with you right now. All we want right now as fans of the Perth Wildcats is transparency. We want to know what is going on. We want to know why these decisions were not made to bring Bryce Cotton back. Now, if it's as simple as saying like money, I can slightly understand it. And maybe you want to go in a different direction. Once again, I can slightly understand it. It's very rare to have an import to stay for 8.5, 9 years in any sort of league around the world. And, we'll cherish with Bryce's capabilities. But it all makes sense now why that historic stretch in the middle of the season was something that we'd never seen before. And I just think it was Bryce giving the middle finger to the whole organization, just telling them right now, you need me, I don't need you. And I think that was a big thing. And, I think there was a lot of feet stamping by Bryce potentially. And again, this is all speculation. We're going to find out in the coming days. But I just think right now it's a massive wait and see from a Perth Wildcats fan perspective. Red Army, let's just stop all the hate comments right now. Let's stop all the talk about booing, understand what the situation is. Then if there's not many valid reasons, all right, then we can figure out what we're going to do after that. But until then, we don't go ahead of everything as well. So, mate, it's been fun. Wildcat Wrap Season 2, Episode 1. It's been a good one, I'm sure. And, I'm sure you're looking forward to the rest of the season as well, mate.
Definitely. And I just want to finish on sort of what you were touching on there. And, the first, day, basically, when you get that news as a Perth Wildcats fan, you're really upset. But then you just have to make sure you sort of take a step back and you realize how fortunate you were for 8 years to 14 times a year to see the greatest player just show us how lucky we were to see him every single night. You're going to see him once, maybe twice a year now, but just really enjoy it. Be thankful that Bryce is still in the league. Yeah, it definitely hurts, but you're only going to have to worry about it 3 times this season. And hopefully the rest of Adelaide is rubbish. That we've seen it before, that if you can shut down Bryce, there are possibilities to win the match. As a Perth Wildcat supporter, we know that all too well, unfortunately. So as great as Bryce is, there's obviously ways to beat the team. So yeah, that's something, a bit of food for thought. But I love the Wildcat Wrap. Can't wait, and really happy that we're rolling again for season 2. And yeah, so much great content coming out on the Barstool Fix. So hit us up on our socials, of course, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and of course all of our podcasts that will be coming out over the next couple of months with team lineups, of course the depth charts. And just before we shoot off, Josh, can you sign us off with also a couple of other things and important information?
Yeah, well, I think most important as well, make sure you go over and check out Bat Banter, Batty's other podcast as well, which is doing incredible things all about Australian sports as well. And he's doing amazing things. And I'll be jumping on there next week as well. Looking forward to that. But make sure you go and check that out as well. He's doing incredible work over there. So if you are an Australian sports fan, or not necessarily just a supporter of the Perth Wildcats, I'm sure he's got everything over there to suit all of your needs. But yeah, plenty coming out as always over here at the Barstool Fix. All these team podcasts will be slowly coming back into it. Illawarra Hawks podcast and Adelaide 36ers podcast is potentially dropping later on in the coming months as well. We've obviously got the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers podcast. We've obviously got the Breakers Breakdown podcast and the King's Table podcast. We've got so many podcasts, I lose the names every now and then. But the Adelaide 36ers one, I think there's not a better year to start an Adelaide 36ers podcast after all this incredible news as well. Make sure you go and check out the socials at the Basketball Fix podcast on Instagram as well. Just eclipsed 3,000 followers yesterday, so everything's starting to really build in the right direction as well. So once again, we thank you for all your support as well. But that'll wrap up today's episode, mate. And it's been a good one, and I'm looking forward to obviously breaking down it further in the coming weeks as well. And stay tuned as well. Declan will be back in the coming weeks as well. But that'll be Wildcat Wrap Season 2, Episode 1. And we hope you've gotten your basketball fix.
Now it's Cotton one-on-one with Tui. Little crossover, slides his way through. Out it goes, Doolittle from the top of the key.